Hi, today we're going to make a very special chocolate cake. This is a chocolate cake like you've never had before, and I got this recipe out of an old McCall's cookbook. So the first time I did this cake, I bought all the ingredients and we were going to take it to the Lancaster reunion. And I got it made up and ready for the frosting, and my husband went in the kitchen and he said, "Honey, you better come in here and look at this cake. It's got a split down it." And I said, "Well, cakes do crack a little bit." And he said, "No, you need to come look at this cake. It's got a crack in it." So I came and looked. Sure enough, that cake had cracked about that big because I didn't level the bottom layer well enough. And so that top layer then went like this, and it had a crack. No amount of frosting could have fixed that cake, so it was too late, and it's too expensive to go and buy all the ingredients again. I had a really pretty punch bowl, and I just chunked it all up into chunks, and I poured the frosting over it and kind of mixed it together for a little bit, and we took it to the family reunion and we called it Chocolate Cake Pudding Surprise, because it was a surprise when we walked in and saw that big crack. This is a multi-step recipe. It's not complicated, but there's a lot of steps to it, and I couldn't get it all written on a whiteboard. But what we're starting off here is a cup of butter, and of course a cup of butter is 2 sticks of butter and 3 squares of chocolate, and we're just going to get that good and melted. While it's melting, I'm going to go ahead and get the next ingredients. 2 eggs, half a cup of buttermilk. So we're going to go ahead and put that in our bowl and get it beaten up. Here we have the 2 sticks of butter, all melted with the 3 squares of chocolate. Here we have the eggs and buttermilk, and we're going to add that. That's the wet ingredients. The dry ingredients are 2 cups of flour, 1 teaspoon of soda, 2 cups of sugar, and a half teaspoon of salt. And I've got it all right here, and I have already sifted it all together. So we've got our dry ingredients and our liquid ingredients, and we'll add it a little at a time with a whisk in between. Okay, that's the last of the dry ingredients. We'll continue stirring it up. Here we've got the cake completely stirred up now. We need 2 8-inch cake pans. Well, I don't have 8-inch cake pans, but I have 9-inch cake pans, so that's what I'm going with. And the only thing it'll do, it'll make your layers a little thinner, but then that can give everybody a bigger slice all around. I have already greased and floured them. So we're going to try to separate this into 2 batches. These are springform pans, but you don't have to use a springform. This is just what I had. I'm a big use what you got kind of girl. Another tip I could give you is when you have a chocolate cake, to flour your pans with cocoa. Another tip is to bang your cake pans on the counter before you put them in the oven, because that helps drive out any bubbles. And we're going to put these in a 350-degree oven for about 25 to 30 minutes. The second part of this cake is the filling, and it calls for 1/4 cup of seedless raisins, 1/2 cup of dates, you put this on the fire and you boil it until the raisins and the dates are plump and all of the liquid has been absorbed. So that's going to take about 5 minutes. The raisins and dates are beginning to plump up now. I did take the option of putting in another tablespoon of water because the raisins weren't as plump as I wanted. Now the next thing is you add a 5.5 ounce can of milk. That's the little can of milk. I've already done that here. It also calls for 3/4 cup of sugar, and like I like to do is I like to use part white sugar, part brown sugar. So I've got a 1/2 cup of white sugar in here and a 1/4 cup of brown sugar, and I'm going to put it in. You stir this, cook and stir until it gets good and thick. So that'll be about 5 minutes. This is what it looks like now. You can see how thin it is, but in about 5 minutes that's going to be good and creamy, kind of like the frosting on a German chocolate cake. Here I am stirring the dates and raisins. They've cooked a good 5 minutes. The liquid is beginning to get thick, and as you can see, it's about the thickness of syrup. So we're going to take it off the fire. We're going to add 1/2 cup of either walnuts or pecans. I have chosen pecans today. We're going to put those pecans in there, and we're going to put a 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla. Oh, that is beginning to smell good now with the vanilla in there. And that's called the filling. So we're through with part 2 now. And this needs to cool a little bit. I just gave my husband a little taste of this, and he had a really good suggestion. He said, mix a batch of just this up and put it on your ice cream. That would be good. So, another Granny B tip. Or I should say a Papa Bruce tip. The cakes have come out of the oven. I've let them cool to touch, and I've removed them from their pans. And so the next step is to take this wonderful filling that my honey said would make wonderful ice cream topping, and we put the filling on top of one of the cakes. So there we go with the filling. So we're going to set that aside because now we have to fix some whipped cream. And my whipped cream and my bowls are in the freezer getting cold, and I'll be right back. Okay, I'm adding 1/2 cup of heavy cream, and we've got a 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla here. But we're going to get this whipped up. We're supposed to whip this till it's stiff. So this is going to take me a little while. Okay, that's pretty stiff. We're going to add that 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla now and just stir it in. Put this on top of this layer. There. Now we're going to put this layer on top. The last step is going to be a chocolate ganache that we pour over the whole thing. Okay, in this pan I have 1/2 cup of sour cream. And here I have 6 ounces of semi-sweet chocolate. I take that back. My darling likes the dark chocolate, so we've got 6 ounces of dark chocolate chips. And we're just going to melt this together. Sour cream and chocolate chips, we're going to melt it together. When you can't see the white of the sour cream anymore, then this has been melted enough. And you do it over low heat because you don't want to scorch this. Or the other method is to do it in a double boiler. Turn the heat off, give it one last stir around, and then we're just going to pour it over this cake. That's easy, easy. Spread it around, get it to the edge, and let some of it drip off. Okay, there we go. I just handed that spatula to my darling to taste, and I personally feel like the dark chocolate, which I love, the dark chocolate is a little too bitter. I believe it would have been bitter if we had used the semi-sweet dark chocolate morsels. But he said he likes it anyway. And you wanted to say what you were going to say?
I wouldn't throw it in the trash.
He's not going to throw it in the trash. But now the instructions say that you need to refrigerate it for at least an hour before you cut into it. So we're going to put it in the refrigerator, and we'll be back in an hour. All right, we've taken the cake out of the refrigerator. I've put it on a pretty platter. If I was going to present this formally, I would put some kind of little decoration here to hide this foil, but we're not going to mess with that today because we can't wait. My dad's already been in here several times. My darling keeps asking me when we're going to get this cake on the road. So let's get this cake on the road. See what happens.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to let my honey have this one. It's the biggest one. I'm going to take one to Daddy. I'll be right back.
Thank you.
You're welcome. What's your impression, darling?
Oh.
His standard answer.
Num 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 num.
It's unbelievable how good that is. That date and raisin filling reminds me of a date nut candy I used to make way back in the 60s. The cake is moist. That whipped cream just adds a dimension to it that I wouldn't have thought of otherwise. But this is a keeper. If you want to do a cake, a really special cake for a special occasion, this is it. This has been Granny B's recipe. Take it and make it your own.